Just Jeffrey's Journey. And today we're going to be reviewing a video by Jordan Peterson regarding Karl Marx and his connection to speaking about Satan. And why is this so important? Because today we are facing so many ideologies and so many beliefs, and we don't know where they come from. Sometimes we support them as believers, and sometimes we reject them, but we need to know where a lot of the things that are being pressed by our government, if it's from God or not, and why governments fall and why they fail and why people suffer and why they don't. Now, God has allowed these governments to be in place, but it doesn't mean that what they're projecting and the way they treat the people is of God, of course. A lot of times these things come from somewhere, and we need to ask, where is it coming from? So the reason why I was so intrigued in talking about Karl Marx is because a lot of people don't realize that in the last few years, especially, we've been just heavily bombarded with Marxism here in America. And I'm not saying this government, but previous governments that were in place were heavily injecting upon the people. And a lot of people don't understand where this comes from. We saw just the liberation of Venezuelans with what happened to Maduro. And we have to understand that these dictators, these communists, nothing under the sun is new. A lot of the stuff they've just practiced from someone else. They've taken it from someone else, right? So Karl Marx was pioneer for the communist movement, realistically, with the Communist Manifesto, which was written in 1848. Now, Karl Marx was born in the early 1800s, correct? And his work didn't really influence the world until he was dead. But he was rejected by many countries because of his ideology. And what he was really trying to do is overthrow capitalism and abolish private property. And basically, the manifesto became one of the most influential political texts in history. This is the game plan where dictators pull pages from. We can see it from Russia, we can see it from China, we can see it from Cuba, Venezuela, Eastern Europe. It goes on and on and on. And really, it's antichrist. It's a really antichrist way of thinking and basically stealing from the people and having it in the hands of the state. Now, we clearly can see that a lot of it is affecting the way we live, right? And even injecting division and manipulating the people with past experiences. We can say the civil rights movement. Why is it still so relevant and being injected in those feelings and the way we think, right? And we can see it across. We can see the hate towards authority. There's the division between whites and black, a division between classes. There's always these divisions, and we got to realize who is injecting these things and why is it so important to make sure that we're not being used as a puppet to carry their plans. So I want to look into this video with Jordan Peterson because Jordan Peterson, more than anyone, is one of those people that brings out many topics and allows us to see and review both sides. Now here's the video.
A chilling play called Ulanem.
These poems that he wrote that were pans to Mephistopheles, is that after he becomes an atheist?
No, he's writing, so the first one was 1837, wrote another in 1841. He wrote a bunch of them.
Right.
He did just a chilling play called Ulanem.
Yes.
Ulanem. And people that are watching this, if they now type into their computer Ulanem, even in Google, it'll pop up. Play by Karl Marx.
Yeah.
It even has a Wikipedia entry. And let me warn people, you might not want to do this, but if you click the images button, there's some satanic stuff up there from.
So you can see clearly that these people who have greatly influenced the world, right, in a negative way, obviously, because Karl Marx did what he did was created documents and wrote books that really just was created to oppress people and hurt people, right? So the enemy has always had his minions. He always places people throughout history. You can see it with Nero, Herod. You can see it with Hitler. You can just see it through history. All these people who have truly have risen and were there to oppress people. So we can see Satan always has this kind of game plan. The same way God raises up young men and women to do great things for the kingdom, the enemy does the same thing. Now, what he's talking about here, that there's a clear connection between Karl Marx and Satan, the devil. So what I'm trying to connect here is that a lot of these people that come with these ideologies and his way of thinking are not people who fear God, have a love for God. They are actually workers of unrighteousness. They're workers of Satan, right? And we have to be very careful in what we believe in or what we support, right? Even in our government, there's certain things that we have to say, wait, is this of God or is this of Satan? So I'm going to continue playing it, but I just want to show you that this man, Karl Marx, he had definitely a connection with Satan. You knew that.
Not heavy metal, but black metal groups. So Ulanem is an anagram for Emmanuel or Emmanuelo.
Right.
So
right.
Marx takes Emmanuel, which is the name given to Christ, or Manuelo, and he flips it into this anagram called Ulanem. And it's this chilling play. The main character is Lucindo, Lucindo. And you just can't believe what you're reading with
History
this
repeats
play.
itself, huh?
So
See
that
now?
was written later in the 1840s. So really the prime of his writing, including the decade when he wrote the Communist Manifesto, is also the same decade when he was writing these poems and plays. And throughout his life, his kids...
Poems and plays. So he's writing poems and plays. We can fast forward that and say, well, how does that relate today to our society and what we are experiencing? Well, music, movies, books, all these things are just the same kind of avenue to get to our minds, to our hearts, right? So if this man is writing these things in the 1800s, mid 1800s, and it's had this mentality and hatred towards Jesus Christ that did nothing to him and is worshiping Lucifer, that clearly shows you that there is a demonic spirit behind this man's work. But God also calls us to be aware, to fight these things. In Luke 10:19, it says, "Behold, I give you authority to trample on serpents and scorpions and over all the power of the enemy, and nothing shall by any means hurt you." Christ is always telling us too that he will give us authority over these demonic things. So please don't be afraid or anything in that nature. This is more of just to be aware. And even in Ephesians 6, it says, "Put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. Therefore, take up the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand." So he's calling us to fight. I'm saying not just to retreat and be afraid. He's calling us to fight and also be aware of your enemy, all right? In James 4:7, it says, "Therefore, submit to God, resist the devil, and he will flee for you." We're called to resist the devil. So why am I speaking about this in this episode? First and foremost is because after I've been really pushing to draw closer to God, right? To pour into other men. I have a small ministry where I have a Bible study with men, side counseling where I do with other guys regarding marriage, regarding masculinity, being a man of God, all these things. I've been getting attacked so bad at work. I've been getting attacked in my home, in my sleep, and it's affected me because I wake up and I'm just exhausted, and I'm like, what is going on? And I'm wanting to leave work. I'm wanting to just cut off all these things and just go live in a mountain somewhere where no one bothers me, right? But that's not what God has called us to do. God will put you in the midst of all these things and leave you there and train you, right? And sharpen you so that you may be able to fight the enemy, not obviously with fists and swords and guns, but spiritually in prayer, in fasting, in community with other believers. Because the enemy is always going to have his minions in your workplace, in your family, in the world, in the government, always going to have his minions that are going to try to twist and make things hard for you to live. But that's not of God. But God calls us to resist those things because this is extremely important.
Yeah, he had a favorite line always from Mephistopheles.
Right,
Everything that exists
right.
deserves to perish. So that remains a part of him throughout his life. His son, Edgar, has a letter where he addresses his father as "my dear devil," which I don't know. Maybe it's playful. I don't know. Although I would never call my dad "my dear devil." His wife called him "my wicked knave." I quote Henrik Heinzen, referring to him as a goblin who tried to take me under his spell. Other cases where he's using that kind of language. When Engels first met him, he describes him as this dark man from Trier who hops and leaps and springs on his heels, the monster of 10,000 devils, he describes him. And the letter from his father
so satanic.
which was written in 1837, a year before his father died. So his father writes to him, March 2nd, 1837. Karl, at times my heart delights in thinking of you and your fortune, and yet at times I cannot rid myself of ideas which arouse in me sad forebodings and fear when I am struck as if by lightning by the thought, is your heart in accord with your head, your talents? Has it room for the earthly but gentler sentiments which in this vale of sorrow, it's a beautiful letter in many ways, are essentially consoling for a man of feeling? And then this question from the father of Karl Marx to his at this point, 18-year-old son. And since that heart, Karl, is obviously animated and governed by a demon, not granted to all men, is that demon heavenly or Faustian?
Wow. Wow. This is a father talking to a son, right? So obviously he's atheist, or nah, he believes in a God, which is Satan. His God is Satan. And he's encouraging his son to allow that demon in him to be manifested correctly. So we can see here that a lot of his works were demonic, were definitely works of Satan. His works always represented a direct attack on faith, right? It was always encouraging societies to suppress faith. And in Christianity, obviously teaches faith is truth and life. There's no deception in that, right? Promoted class struggles as engine of history, fostering resentment and division. But Christ teaches what? He teaches that love your neighbors, reconciliation, non-hatred, to submit to authorities, either in your job or in the government. Submit to them as long as they're not contrary to the faith, right? So there was a complete attack on Christianity, because Christianity is the opposing side here. This guest that Jordan Peterson brings in, he is just calling out all the demonic jab Karl Marx really showed and displayed in his works. So let's continue listening to it.
Will you ever, and that is not the least painful doubt of my heart, will you ever be capable of truly human domestic happiness? Will, and this doubt has no less tortured me since I have come to love a certain person like my own child, will you ever be capable of imparting happiness to those immediately around you? By the way, the answer was no, right?
Well,
but that
obviously
phrase,
the father
since,
had intimations of that.
yeah, and since that heart is obviously animated and governed by a demon not granted to all men, is that demon heavenly or Faustian?
Right,
That's his
right.
dad.
Yeah.
And there's only so many of those things, I think, that a sympathetic Marxist or Marxist biographer can shrug off. I mean, there's just so many statements like that from him and people about him and people who knew him and loved ones and a wife, a son, a best friend.
This way of thinking, what it really does, it produces a generation or a people that truly hate God, one. Two, you can see the repercussions of this way of thinking. Many mass persecution, suppression of faith, but Jesus taught the contrary. He taught about truth is known by its fruit. How you treat other people, how you love other people, right? Forgiveness. And we can see that with BLM, their founders, those ladies, clearly and openly stated that they were trained Marxist. What? And they used the situation that happened in this country between law enforcement and the black community to capitalize and inject what? Division, hate, and more importantly, really deceptively introduce something else, right? And it really didn't allow the black community to be more free or to enjoy more of the things that we're struggling with. Right? It was more bringing back what their ancestors went through. Marxism is always a way to deceive. Satan is the father of deception. He is. He shows himself as an angel of light. He uses these moments to what? To steal your heart, to manipulate you, and then what? He traps you. So these things are not new, you know? Even before Karl Marx, there were many others who sprung up and did the same thing. But especially in our times, right? Here in America, we can see that his works have heavily influenced us, have affected our communities, our homes, even in the workplace. You know, the whole feminist movement, it started off with something very good, and allowing women to have rights to work, to vote, and look at what it has become now, where this push for equality is not really equality, right? Because it's not about who's performing the best. It's about numbers. Okay, we're gonna give 50 of these people and 50 of these people, and then that makes 100. No, but it's not the best qualified. It's not who performs the best. It's none of these things. So it creates a division in society, and it hurts society.
Was he a Satanist, right?
Well,
That is a whole different thing that I can't personally answer.
well, it seems not unreasonable to presuppose that he was a devotee of the Mephistophelian ethos.
Yeah, I think that's
right. So
really
the question is, what constitutes a Satanist? Well, someone who generates a murderous doctrine, that raises questions. I mean, dead serious about that. Like
right.
The most murderous doctrine ever promoted in the roughly Judeo-Christian context by a large margin. So I would say it's incumbent on those who would defend him to describe why we wouldn't just assume that. But the part of the reason that I was so interested in talking to you was because I felt that what you documented in your book was extraordinarily telling from the psychological perspective, because I know how these things work. And it is not something that can be overlooked, that was his favorite quote.
Right.
I mean, especially not when you understand Goethe's centrality in the German intellectual tradition. That's like having a favorite quote from Shakespeare, right? And it's not any old quote. It's the central credo of Mephistopheles. So that's extraordinarily telling. Now, I do have another.
Can I give you a...
Yes.
So Robert Payne, the very serious academic, no right-winger, British man of letters, the guy who really broke this first in his 1968 biography of Marx, all right? His chapter where he talks about this stuff is called The Demons in his Marx biography. Now, he wrote this, and I'm not saying that I endorse this. As an academic, I can't say if this is correct. There were times when Marx seemed to be possessed by demons. That's what Payne wrote.
Wow. So this man was definitely heavily influenced by Satan himself.
And now this I would at least more endorse. Marx had the devil's view of the world and the devil's malignity. Sometimes he seemed to know that he was accomplishing works of evil. I think that gets closer to it. Now, Pastor Richard Wurmbrand, who wrote the famous book Tortured for Christ, and was tortured for Christ in Romanian prisons by communist captors who were shouting, "I am the devil," while they were torturing him. He did a book called Marx and Satan. He's convinced that Marx was a Satanist and did some things ritualistically that it might have even been satanic. But I can't say that. I can't endorse that.
You know, he's trying not to kind of give his full opinion regarding the situation with Karl Marx, if he's satanic or not. But Jordan Peterson is clearly saying, like, call a spade a spade. At the end of the day, his works clearly show satanic influence. As believers, as someone who's starting in the faith, is to be aware of what you're being taught in the public school system, in the universities, that a lot of these doctrines, a lot of these way of thinking are really to indoctrinate you. Therefore, as believers, we ought to be, mindful of the word of God, and also at the same time, make sure that what we're being taught or what we're allowing ourselves to openly receive, that they're not contradicting our faith. So this is just a quick video just to encourage you, and more importantly, to know that in 1 Peter 5:8-9 as well, it says, "Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, walks about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. Resist him, steadfast in the faith, knowing that the same suffering are experienced by your brotherhood in the world." So this is my message to you. Thank you for continuing to walk in Just Jeffrey's journey. Thank you.